There's so much power in forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of others. And I want to talk to you about it today. I'm continuing my discussions about my childhood trauma and what I've learned about it and how it's affected me and how my healing journey, growing journey, personal growth journey has changed for me. My name is Matt Gerlach. Welcome to my podcast, Matters of the Mind, Rise to Your Worth. I work with high performers, executives, entrepreneurs who are incredibly driven and looking to build fulfilling and aligned and authentic lives, but are held back from limiting beliefs from childhood and past traumas. I have walked the walk and been called to help people who have done everything right, but still feel like something is missing on the inside because of the effects they've had from childhood trauma. I've been there and I'm uniquely positioned to serve. And it's my honor to be able to talk to you about this today and share my journey. These few episodes that I'm doing right now, the last episode was really more of a broad overview of this journey and how childhood trauma has affected me. And my purpose in doing this is twofold, I would say. One, I want you to be able to understand that healing from this childhood trauma, acknowledging it, has so much power. And I think a lot of us, if you're like me, you might not realize that what happened during your childhood affects you. And it does. It really does. And I think that we are absolutely conditioned to not want to be honest about the effects of it because somebody did something to us as a child if we had a traumatic childhood, and we're not supposed to admonish our caretakers. I also want to normalize it. That's a lot of what this episode is about right now, is that I generally think, and from what I have learned from my studies, from the clients that I've worked with, parents, caretakers are generally doing their best with what they have. And it's hard to acknowledge that there were things that happened to us. It's hard to go on this journey, but I know no other way. If I wouldn't have gone on my journey to open up and to acknowledge to myself that my childhood affected me, I'm 41 right now. I would have bet $1 million at 33 years old when I was in the thick of this that I wouldn't have lived to see my 40th birthday. And a lot of that was because I had serious health problems, not even just emotional health problems. I was suffering from anxiety, from depression, and from panic attacks. I had incredibly high blood pressure. And the more learning I've done, high blood pressure, at 33 years old, I was taking blood pressure medication. And that's not exactly normal. While we aren't exactly certain, there is a lot of data out there that points to a traumatic childhood leading to coronary problems and to autoimmune diseases that really affect us. And stress is one of the leading killers of Americans, of humans. And stress and our ability to handle stress is severely diminished from what happens to us in childhood. We don't learn coping mechanisms, and our bodies are just on high alert all the time. We're on defense mode. We're constantly hypervigilant, and that kills people. And I have made it through. I want to talk today about one of the big pieces that came up for me along this journey. It's the beginning and part of the resolution, and it's about forgiveness. And I was talking with somebody about this recently, and it made me want to do an episode about this because I have a lot to say about it. I think that I have done a good job in navigating it. And really, the benefits that forgiveness have brought to me are life-changing. I have here goes. I have always been incredibly hard on myself. And I look around me, I have other people in my life who have had rough childhoods, and I see the same for them, that they are, I see a lot of people that I grew up with, and I know that their childhoods were similar to me, and I see the same for them. We become perfectionists. We become very hard on ourselves because we believe that if we can do everything right, then there's not going to be pain coming our way. We start to blame ourselves. I mean, we absolutely start to blame ourselves when there's two people involved, and one of them is an adult that hurts a child, and the adult lets us believe that we are at fault for that. We start to really become self-flagellating, and we turn on ourselves. The only explanation when a caretaker hurts you and leaves you to suffer alone and to work through a problem like this, like I said on the last episode that I recorded last week, I remember, growing up, and punishments were severe, and I would act out. I was a child that was in a lot of pain, still really investigating what's going on. And, I think that there's a big part of my childhood that I don't understand. And the more that I'm learning about childhood trauma, I showed symptoms of something going on at a very early age. And I'm still trying to figure it out. But as long as I can remember, I was acting out, and I was being punished severely for acting out. I now know that when children act out, much like adults, when people are acting out and causing somebody else pain, it's because they're hurting. I was hurting as a child very badly, and I remember that punishments would happen. It would be in my bedroom, and I would be left in my bedroom, and it would be light outside still. The blinds would be closed, and I would be told to just sit there and deal with it myself, sobbing so hard that I couldn't breathe, and just trying to make sense about what happened. And as a child, what other sense could I make out of it other than I was a very bad person to provoke something like that to happen? Fast forward 20, 30 years, I never let go of that. I always just believed that something was wrong with me, and I was very hard on myself. This was probably the last hill I had to climb because I just couldn't see it. One of my friends, I remember, she was, when I lived in New York, she was telling me, she was like, "Matt, you're harder on yourself than anybody I've ever met." And I remember just like, okay, like, what do I do with this? There was nothing I could do with it. Like, you don't look in the mirror and tell yourself you're a worthless piece of shit if you lose a sale at work, or you don't when somebody, doesn't respond to you the way that you want them to, you don't look at yourself and say that it's your fault for doing something wrong. Like, I just couldn't see this until I started to forgive what happened in my childhood. I started to realize that none of us are perfect. And there's so much, forgiveness is such a complex issue because on one hand, we're doing it for ourselves, holding on to that pain is not helping us at all. But on the other hand, there is this element of it where when we forgive somebody else, we're also forgiving ourselves. We're also teaching ourselves to forgive ourselves. Something clicked for me when I started to forgive my caretakers, legitimately forgive. And it didn't mean I forget. It didn't mean that I forgave necessarily. I think an apology is really required to accept, to totally to move on in a healthy way. And a lot of people can't apologize, and there's an acceptance that goes along with that. And the forgiveness for me was something it was permission. It was permission for me to move on. It was saying, essentially, I acknowledge that you did some version of your best. I also acknowledge that, you can't own up to that or whatever, but that's not part of the forgiveness piece. It was more just I forgive people that don't know any better. I forgive people that don't have the capability to be able to acknowledge, to apologize, quite frankly, for what happened. I feel like I hope I'm making sense right now, but where I want to take this is the power of forgiveness of others allows us to start forgiving ourselves. When I started to really look at other people through, and this was a process. A lot of it was through yoga and meditation and philosophy and learning that when we forgive others, there's a meta meditation, which means offering loving kindness to ourselves, to others, close to us, to the whole world. We start to realize that nobody is perfect. And that's really there is so much freedom in realizing that nobody is perfect, because when you acknowledge and truly own up to the fact that other people aren't perfect, you get to stop expecting perfection out of yourself. And that was the biggest element of freedom. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders once I started to realize that I could forgive myself for the things that I did. And it all started by forgiving others. I'm a firm believer, and I think that we can all generally agree to this, that we are our own worst critic. We're harder on ourselves than anybody else would ever be on us, for the most part. And by me forgiving others, it was the entryway into me learning to forgive myself. By forgiving myself, I realized I didn't have to be perfect. I started allowing myself to make mistakes. I started allowing myself to be honest with myself about the things that, quite frankly, I didn't like about myself. I was numbing the pain of what I was going through. And I had always been taught that numbing pain, drinking, all of those coping mechanisms that I was doing, I was taught that that meant I was a bad person. And once I started to forgive others, I was starting to realize oh, Matt, you're just doing the best you can right now with what you have. And quite frankly, I was just doing the best I could with what I had. When we are not taught that it's okay to make mistakes, we become so hard on ourselves, and we carry that through to adult life. And eventually we crack, because nobody, not a single person in the world, can be flawless. Nobody can be perfect and not make mistakes. And what I've figured out, what I have seen for myself and what I see for my clients, is that once we start allowing ourselves to be human, to make mistakes, to embrace the failures we have, that's when the real growth happens. None of us are perfect, and I've said that a million times. Once we start to allow these failures to be part of the journey, we allow ourselves to grow more and more and more, because guess what? When you're growing, you're making more and more failures. You're going more wrong ways than you are right ways. If we never allow ourselves to go the wrong way, we're really stifling our growth. That's the message I have for you today. If you are being hard on yourself, if you are struggling to forgive yourself, I invite you to consider trying to forgive others. It's not about maybe acknowledging to them that you're forgiving them, but for me, I found that it worked very, very well. I was able to start forgiving others, and that allowed me to have an access point to where I could stop expecting so much of myself. The journey of life is a messy life, and I'm in a point of transition right now. David and I are starting our family. We are on our surrogacy journey, and man, so much is coming up for me. And I'm realizing this is quite honestly the hardest thing I've ever gone through, all the change that's going on, but it doesn't really feel that hard, because I am allowing myself the space, the grace, the compassion that's necessary to try something new, to start down a new path that I haven't been on before. And guess what? When you start on a new path, a lot of things are going to come up, and a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors, a lot of failures are going to happen. And if you can't forgive yourself, you're never going to be able to grow to your fullest potential. I'm going to leave you there today. I want you to know that it is so important to learn how to stop being so hard on yourself. You do not have to be perfect. And guess what? When you aren't perfect, when you embrace your imperfections, when you fail in front of other people and fail publicly and do it with vulnerability and compassion for yourself, you're showing others that it's okay for them to do it too. No one ever modeled for me failure being okay. I saw people being like, no, like, that's not, like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, you're wrong. That taught me that I wasn't supposed to do anything wrong either. When you do well, you are showing others that they can embrace failures, that they can take risks, that they can live a life of abundance and alignment and fulfillment because they are listening to themselves and they're allowing themselves to make errors and fail along the way. I thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any feedback at all, any questions, anything I said that resonated, I'd be so grateful to hear from you. I'm trying to share my journey. I want you to see that this is a messy life that we're in, and when we're going after our authentic lives, when we're making big changes, there are big failures. There's a lot that comes up. I want you to see that it's normal and just to be vulnerable about it, just to be honest, to raise your hand and ask for help. Speaking of which, if you need any help, I coach people just like you who are trying to achieve miraculous and amazing things. Schedule a call with me and I would be glad to give you a free 45 minutes of my time, and hopefully we can break through something that's going to set you free to build the life that you are destined to have. Thank you so much for joining me today.